Hi, and welcome to another BREWHA video. In this video, we're going to be looking at how to use the BREWHA system to produce your own liquor. The BREWHA system can produce all kinds of liquor. It can produce whiskeys if you're starting with a cereal. You'd use the mash colander to produce your beer effectively. That's the starting point for whiskey. And you would use all the methods that are discussed in many articles and videos on the website to produce a good beer. Distillers sometimes use shortcuts to produce the beer quicker, and then they clean up their liquor down the road with carbon, running it through carbon, leaving it on oak for a long time, which pulls some of the flavor out of it. But if you use the methods that are on the website, the BREWHA website, to produce a beer that is very tasty and drinkable, then your spirit is going to be that much better as well. It can also be used to produce brandy. You would just start with a fruit base instead of the cereal base. It could be used to produce tequila, and today we're using it to produce rum. So we have a cane sugar base with some fancy molasses. We're using the small 4-in-1 fermenter. The 3-in-1s can also be used, but the 4-in-1 has a domed lid, so it supports the column a little bit better. How we produce the rum, we did it the same way that we would produce beer. We didn't have the long boil period, but we did boil it very briefly just to sanitize everything on the inside so that the yeast that we were using was the only microorganism in there that was fermenting the sugars. We also added some yeast nutrient because sugar does not have any nutrient in it, and the yeast needs some nutrient in order to finish fermentation well. But otherwise it was the same. We heated the water up, we added our sugar, turned the heating element off at that point so that the sugar didn't coat the element and scorch it. Then we mixed the sugar water really well to dissolve all the sugar and the molasses that was in there. We took it up to boil, emptied out our ports to sanitize all the ports, put the sugar water back in, boiled it for a few minutes, added our yeast nutrient, cooled it down, and then pitched our yeast. I've often used EC 1118, which is a very common yeast. It can be found at any homebrew shop. But of course there are specific rum or whatever kind of liquor you're producing, yeast that is tailored specifically for the production of that kind of spirit. So the original gravity when we started fermentation was about 1080, which with that 10 pounds of sugar and about 2.5 pounds of fancy molasses, which gives a potential ABV of about 12%. And we did ferment out very dry. It finished at about 1.0. And so we should see that, which would give a little over half a gallon of pure ethanol. We're going to be taking it off today at an average of about 50-55%. And so we're going to see just about a gallon of spirit that we're going to recover from this today. Okay, so briefly looking at the assembly here. Up at the top here we have the complete condensing assembly, which is on the BREWHA website. And below it we have 2 sight glasses, which are from the yeast harvester page. You can just buy them individually. We put them on. It provides 2 things for us. One, we can make sure that the wash is not burping up into the still. If it is, we can just turn the heat down and settle that down. Secondly, we pack it full of copper mesh. You can buy 100% copper mesh from a number of sources online or at your local supply shop, and it just the copper does 2 things. It scrubs sulfur compounds, and it also provides a means of reflux. Reflux, of course, is where heavier molecules that are getting carried out with your vapor condense out and drop back into your still, and that just means that it provides a pure stream. Above it is the complete condensing assembly. The only piece we don't have from the complete assembly in right now is the T, where you can put a temperature sensor in, and that allows you to monitor the temperature of the vapor that's just before it hits the condenser. This is a shotgun condenser or shell and tube condenser. We put cold water into the jacket, and it surrounds tubes, a bunch of tubes that the vapor goes into. When the vapor hits those cold tubes that are cooled by the water, it condenses them out and we'll get vapor dropping out the bottom. So we're going to connect the cold water and start running that now. Okay, so while the wash is heating up, I just want to overview the commercial column that we have. It's a 4 sight glass column, and we provide a stainless steel mesh on a Viton ring that can sit in here and hold the copper mesh, similar to what we showed with the sight glasses down there. Or you could independently purchase bubble caps and put them in there if you wanted. Above that's a deflagmator. It's similar to the shotgun condenser, it just has bigger holes, and it's meant to do partial knockdown. How you would connect that is you run your cold water into the condenser here, it goes up, heats up a bit, and then you run the water, instead of going to the drain, you run it over into the deflagmator, and then warm water is in here, and it provides a bit more knockdown. You don't have to connect that if you don't want to. Temperature gauge, and then the vapor comes over and condenses out. This is a parrot. You put your hydrometer, your alkalometer in here, and it just floats, and so you get a constant reading of what your alcohol level is inside the condensate that's coming off. This valve here is just to drain it at the very end. This is where you would collect, you'd run a hose into your collection vessel, and this off to the side here is just a breaker, vacuum breaker. So you just leave that open or run it to a hose. Okay, so the condensate has just started to come now. We're going to collect about 3 to 5%, which will amount to about 200 milliliters of distillate. Then we're going to pitch that, and then we'll collect about 300 milliliters of heads, or about about 10 ounces of heads. Then we'll go into our hearts. We'll collect about 3 liters of that, and then we'll finish off with a bit of the tails. We've started collecting this at about 90 degrees Celsius, or about 190 Fahrenheit. There are tables online that show the ratio, given how much ethanol, what your ethanol and water ratio is, when you should expect it to start boiling. And that's it. It's a pretty simple and straightforward process. Once you've produced your beer or your wash, the actual stripping process is pretty simple and straightforward. We're still about 2 liters in that we've collected, and it's still at just over 60% alcohol. So we're probably going to shut it off. It's at 94 degrees Celsius, and we'll switch it over to collecting our tails at about 96. Collect about 300 milliliters of tails, and then shut it off. So that's it. Pretty simple, straightforward. If you have any questions about it, feel free to contact us using the form on the BREWHA website. And thank you for watching.